Hello and welcome back to another video. Sorry it's been a while. I just haven't had time to do this stuff because stuff like this takes a while. Anyways, so I don't know about all of you people, but I'm so ready for fall. I personally just don't like the heat. Like, my body just gets hot so easily to the point that a lot of times the heat makes it hard for me to think. I can't work as well. So I'm just ready for it to be finally below 70. I don't even mind the winter, so I'm very excited for that. And I also like spooky season too. Of course, what kind of person who dresses up as a plague doctor wouldn't? But anyways, so moving on to the actual thing I'm here for is to talk more about books. Today I am going to do some of my just all-time favorite books. Some of them that I read in the last video that I read recently, or ones I just talked about in that video, are some of them, and I'm not going to talk about them again. I will probably mention them, which ones are my top ones, in that video, in the description, or I might do it at the end of this video. So, we are going to start with a book called We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And I actually bought this book because I liked the cover so much. I just thought it looked really cool. And the back also looks cool. So for those of you who don't know, which I didn't know, I think a lot of people don't know this, but Shirley Jackson was the woman who wrote The Lottery. If you remember being traumatized by that in school, they had me read that in middle school. If you don't know what I'm talking about, it's a disturbing short story, and I recommend just reading it yourself because it's just something you need to experience. But basically, The Lottery is about this main character who name is Maricat Blackwood, is 18, and that is very hard to remember because she has a stunted maturity. Her maturity was just stunted for reasons that I can't say without spoiling it. And for even in the beginning of the book, she says that she's 18, but I quickly forgot about it after I got to at least chapter 2. I imagine her as a 12-year-old. So the author does good at that, and I am sure that she did that on purpose after reading this book. And it's about her and her sister Constance, who is afraid to ever go outside. I know that's a phobia, but I can't think of the name right now. And I don't know if she was written to have that at all, or if the author just kind of put that there, because this book wasn't really written when mental health was really taken seriously and stuff. So I don't know, but she is terrified to go outside at all. So basically, she stays inside, and if they ever need anything, her sister gets hit. And they are both hated by the community that they live near because the community believes that her, Constance, the older one, killed their entire family. Because before this, there was those two, their grandfather, grandmother, and their parents. And the grandma and the parents died somehow. And the grandfather didn't die, but he physically isn't the same anymore. And Constance, the older one, was put on trial for that, and it's the reason why she's afraid to go outside now, because she had so much publicity from that. Anyways, I really liked how it was a very interesting take on kind of the female perspective and feminism, sort of, back then, because looking up some of the context and stuff after I read it, Shirley Jackson wrote this, and a lot of people believe with her experience of she moved to like a new place with her husband and she felt very isolated, and she built up a lot of resentment from that, and you can feel a lot of, I feel like, just female rage in it, and because just how the times were set up and how the two girls, especially Maricat, kind of combat this. And I wouldn't say it's like some inspirational girl power story. Like, it's definitely very messed up, but like in a good way. If you're someone who likes messed up things that are like interesting, I would definitely recommend this. But like the stuff they do, mostly Maricat does all this, like shows kind of that almost like female power, but it's also like in a messed up way. So I recommend this a lot. And again, this is what it looks like, and there is a black cat in it, and I can't remember its name, but very cute. So We Have Always Lived in the Castle by Shirley Jackson. And also another nice thing about it, it's not that long, and there's not really any romance in it at all. So that's my first recommendation. So my next one of my top books I've ever read is a book I've talked a lot about on my Instagram, so if any of you are sick of that, me talking about it, I'm sorry. I'm gonna do it again, and it's Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe. Wow. It's by Benjamin Alir Sayons, and I'm pretty sure I said that wrong, so I'm very sorry. And basically, this book is meant to be kind of a coming-of-age book, but I think it's a lot different than other coming-of-age books, because I feel like whenever I read or watch any sort of coming-of-age thing, there's like kind of this separation of realism to it. Like, I just feel like sometimes when people write things about teens, they're just not how teens are, or the experience of being in high school, especially when a lot of people romanticize like being a teenager, when that's so wrong. And this book just feels like really real to me. The main character whose name is Aristotle, but he goes by Ari, I just see a lot of myself in him, especially at the age that he is. And it's not just about like the kids in the story, it's also about the parents and sort of just trying to learn how to build a relationship with your parents, which sounds strange, but I think it might sound strange, but sometimes it's something you have to learn to do when you become a teenager, and you just see your parents differently. They're more than just like mommy and daddy, they're their own people. They're your caregivers, but they're also your own people, their own person. And as someone who has a hard time showing, I guess, my gratitude or affection towards my parents, I really relate to Ari in that way, because he also struggles with that, and some of the stuff he says just really has resonated with me. And it is also a romance with him and another kid named Dante, and it also is an interesting way to see how kind of queer love was at this time, because I think takes place in the 70s or 80s, around there. I don't know the exact time. No, it'd have to be the 80s, because Ari's dad was a Vietnam vet, so it's definitely after the 70s. And that also contributes to Ari's issues with connecting with his family, and just his insecurities and stuff. I think it does just a really good job at talking about it, but it doesn't just magically gets better like a lot of other coming of age books, and I really recommend it. I know it's YA, which is young adult if you don't know what that means, but I really think this book is for all ages, for people who are teenagers, for people who aren't anymore. I think it really can speak to everyone, and I really recommend it. So the next book I am going to talk about is Ace of Spades. Now this book is about the two main characters right there and there, and they go to a prestigious boarding school, and suddenly this mysterious person, they don't know who it is, starts trying to like sabotage them and leaks different information and videos and stuff about them. So, and then they want to figure out who it is and why they're doing that. So it does talk about racism in this book. In their boarding school, there's only 2 black people in the entire school. And I am not, black or anything, so I can't perfectly speak for this, but I do think it does a good job at talking about it, and I feel like I learned a lot about racism and it's also a little bit of like a mystery book, and even if you're not into mystery, like the genre itself, I still think this is like a very friendly book for you to read. It's just very good. This is one of the only books I've read where I was anxious reading it, like physically anxious. My heart was pounding sometimes when I was reading this because I was just in so much anticipation of what was happening, and I was so worried for these characters. And the only way you could be worried for characters like that are if they're likable, and I do love the characters in this book. The author does a good job at characterization and stuff, and another thing is there is queer rep in this book. There is, one of the main characters is, as far as I know, unlabeled but also sapphic. And the other one is gay, and they both have their experience. They both talk about their experiences with being queer. And it's just a good book. I haven't felt so much tension and anticipation in a book for a long time, and I really like the ending of this book. It's not just like a dark, depressing book, so I definitely recommend it. Ace of Spades. So the next book I'm going to be talking about is Dread Nation. Now, when people ask me what this book is about, it's always like I have a hard time doing it because it sounds so silly sometimes, but it's so good. It's about basically if in the middle of the Civil War, a zombie apocalypse breaks out. And that kind of sounds stupid, like, I get that, but the way the author handles it and writes it is so good. And as someone who really likes history and is a history nerd, I thought she did an amazing job at making it still feel historical while it literally being a zombie apocalypse. Like, if a zombie apocalypse did happen during the Civil War, I really feel like it would turn out the way it did in this book. And, of course, you don't need to love history to enjoy this book, but that's just my take as someone who likes historical things. So I also really like the main character, which that's her, Jane McKean. She's just so funny, and she's just always just kind of a no-nonsense kind of person, and it's just fun to read about her and her takes on stuff. And there isn't romance in this book, but there's a second book, and I have heard there is, so I haven't read that book yet. I want to, it's on my TBR. And so she is queer. I don't know if she's bi or pan. I don't know the exact, or she even, has exact labels, because, this is during the 1860s, a little, probably after 1860s actually, so 1800s or early 1900s, so, it's not like they have a ton of labels for people back then. But also, there's another character in this book who is also significant, and she, in our modern terms, would be described as Aro Ace, basically, and she's a pretty rad character, too. Just the plot of this is really cool and good, and it's not just about, like, surviving, which, sometimes that is interesting, but sometimes it kind of gets old when it comes to apocalypse books. Like, there's more of a complex plot to this, and I am really excited to read the second book. So, this is Dread Nation. Okay, so the next book I am going to be talking about is actually a manga, and if you don't know what that is, I recommend looking it up, because the internet will explain it better than I will. And it's called Boys Run the Riot. This book is about a trans male and him trying to just survive high school as a trans character, and also just him kind of coming into his identity more. And what's kind of interesting about this book, or not this book, but like an interesting perspective that I would have never thought about, because I went to an American public school, is he has to worry about school uniforms, because this takes place in Japan, and they have school uniforms as far as I know. So it talks about how he kind of deals with that, which is interesting to me. And I know that I'm pretty sure that the author in this is also trans. So, and it's also about him meeting some other people, and they decide to make a clothing line, which sounds kind of silly, but it's really interesting, and it's interesting how he kind of tries to help his friends out to understand how he feels, and it's kind of cool to see that even though his friends don't 100% understand it, at first they still just don't question it. They're not like, oh, you're just pretending, or oh, that doesn't make sense. Like, they really do try to listen to his experiences and stuff, and it's really refreshing to see that in any sort of novel, but especially manga, because I feel like manga does a lot of stereotypes a lot. I'm not saying that novels don't, but I don't know, I just feel like it just is like, gets away with it more, like, especially even like the sexualization of like teenagers, like people just kind of brush that off a lot more than in novels, and I just feel like just queer culture in general is handled really well in these books, because there's different volumes, so I've read more of them in just this one. And I definitely recommend it. And I also recommend it especially if you're someone who doesn't really know about the trans experience. Of course, if you do, this might be very, really resonate with you, but also if you don't really understand that stuff, I feel like this is helpful. And it talks about it in a more creative and interesting way. Sometimes it's easier to hear someone talk about their experience with it than just reading a website or something. So this is my next book. So that is all for today. Thank you for sitting here and listening to me ramble for a while. I might do a part 2 of my top book, because I have some more, and it would probably take too long to fit them all in one video. So, yeah, you can wait for that. As I've said before, I don't have a set schedule of how I want to post these things. So, and I can't guarantee I do it consistently, because this does take a lot of time and I need a lot of space and stuff to do it, so I can't guarantee anything, but I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your time on this earth. See ya!